Hi everyone, I'm Carol Keller, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Illinois in the United States, and I'm happy to be presenting today as part of our Woohoo Black Friday weekend. I am going to be using the Cottage Wreaths bundle to make a card. I hope you like it. Let's get started. Here is the card that I designed for you today, and it uses, like I said, the Cottage Wreaths bundle. And it also uses the Painted Christmas Designer Series paper and the seasonal labels dies, as well as the Sweet Candy Canes stamp set for the sentiment on the inside. So let's get started. I will show everything to you at the end, but I'm starting off with a basic white card base. And using my bone folder as always to give it a nice crease to help it to lie flat. And then I have cut already a piece of Evening Evergreen cardstock that is the same size as the card front, so 5.5 by 4 1/4 or 14.9 by 10.5 centimeters. And I've also cut my first layer, and actually beware because it's a little bit directional. It's got to go on this way, so be careful the way you cut it and also the way you adhere it. And this is our first layer, so this is 5 1/4 inches by 4 inches or 14.4 centimeters by 10 centimeters. And we're just going to adhere the first layer right away, and then we're going to put some ribbon on this one before we adhere that. So for layer number 1, I'm using my multi-purpose liquid glue so that I can make sure I can position it exactly where I would like it. Perfect. And then, like I said, before we adhere this layer, we're going to add some Pool Party ribbon. Now, I will tell you this package of Designer Series paper doesn't say that it has Pool Party, but I really think that's what color that is. So I don't know if it's a mistake or it's meant to be a different color stamped off. I'm not really sure, but I'm going with Pool Party. So for that, I need my glue dots. And I think I said this is Pool Party sheer ribbon. So pretty. So I felt it needed just a little bit extra something. So we'll put that on. Just putting a glue dot at each end. And I like to work off the roll so there isn't any waste. And then this one I will adhere with Stampin' Seal. This is my preferred adhesive, the wonderful Stampin' Seal, and make sure you go over that ribbon to give it some extra adhesion. And then we're going to layer this, and I think this is, most of the stems are going this way, so I think it is right side up. And then I also cut from the seasonal labels dies, the biggest die in Pool Party. So we're going to put that aside for the moment because we're going to do some stamping. So I have a little scrap here, and I'm going to stamp one of the wreaths from the Cottage Wreaths stamp set, also in Pool Party. I'm going to stamp it toward the end because we have some other things to stamp, and we're going to be cutting it out anyway. So I love it. Distinctive stamps, lots of layers of color, beautiful. So we are done with the Pool Party. And next I'm going to bring in Evening Evergreen, and we're going to use this stamp, also from the Cottage Wreaths set. And we're going to stamp a bunch of them. There are 2 dies in the set to cut these out. So I'm just stamping a bunch. We need about, I think I used 12 or 14 of the leaves, so we'll stamp enough so that we have that many as well. Maybe one more, see if we can get away with that. I think we can. And then I'm going to cut all of those out. But first, while we have that Evening Evergreen, we're going to bring in the label and stamp the Merry Christmas at the top. Just like that. And then for the inside, we're going to use the Evening Evergreen also to stamp the sentiment, which, as I said, is from the Sweet Candy Canes dies. And it says, Wishing you lots of love, joy, and happiness this Christmas season and always. And I have a little tip. Sometimes the message is not really lined up with the edge of the rubber. So when you go to stamp it, and I'm going to bring in a scrap to show you, it's not even. Let's see. This one's pretty good. So what I did was line up. You can see there's a little extra, or the rubber at the bottom is not even. So all I did was ink it up and look at my bottom line and line that up with my grid paper. Hopefully I can do this without getting my head in the way. And put that on the line. See, it goes up a little bit. Let's try that one more time. So basically, you want to get a feel for if you need to, I need to tilt it down just a little bit so that it's even on my card. So hopefully that makes sense. That's my little tip. So if I tilt it down just a little bit, and it's still uneven. So it is tilted down. I think, let me try it one more time. I think I'm a little nervous doing this on camera because when, of course, I did it on my own, it worked fine. So again, I'm taking the lines on the grid paper and lining them up with the bottom of the stamp. So it goes up a little bit. So you need to tilt it down just a little. And then it works. So don't do what I did on the card. Do what I did on the grid paper and take your time. And you can absolutely practice on your grid paper till you have the feel of exactly which angle you need to do it, and then do it on your card. So, but we're gonna go with that anyway. Oh, and before we put that ink away, we're gonna ink Merry Christmas also on the envelope because we don't want any naked envelopes. So, got our Merry Christmas, and we're going to leave that here. We have one more thing to stamp on that envelope, and for that I'm going to bring in Sweet Sorbet, and we're going to stamp on the inside as well. There's a pretty little bow from the set, and we're going to stamp that on the back just to add a little extra something. So the envelope is done, and then I decided to add a bow underneath the sentiment like that. Just like I said, for a little bit of interest. So now our stamping is done. And I'm going to cut these out and be right back. All right, so I have cut out that wreath, and I also cut out, of course, the little pine branches. Lots of them. I actually have some left over from creating the first card. And I cut out 5 of these in Pear Pizzazz. They are also dies from the set. There are 3 of them, I believe. And this cute little bow. So now we'll start our assembly. And just a little FYI too, if you are unhappy with the direction of your stamping, or you mess up on the inside, you can always put, like Seasonal Labels has some smaller ones. You could always put one or find one from another set that goes over there, or Punch maybe that goes over it. And I would have done that before I stamped the bow, but I'm going to live with that being a little crooked because, you know, it is handmade, so it is more personal. But if it drives you crazy, that's what you can do, is put another label, stamp on that label, and get it to where you're happy with it, and then place it over your mistake on the inside. And for this label, I actually had it this way at first, but I didn't like the way the wreath lay on it. There was a lot of white space, and I didn't have room really for the Merry Christmas. So I decided to just turn it this way, and I was so much happier with it. So that's a little FYI too. We're going to assemble our wreath like this though, because I want to bump it up with dimensionals. That's why I could have stamped it directly on there, but that's why I didn't. And when I assembled this one, I started with the Pear Pizzazz pieces, but this time I'm going to start with the pine branches. So I've got my glue dots, and I can see actually I didn't get really good coverage down here, so that's where the bow's gonna go. Although most of it gets hidden anyway. There are just little peaks of Pool Party, and I do want to make sure that those peaks stay there. So we will start assembling this way and maybe alternate. I used a lot of small ones on that one because I was kind of fitting in with these fitting in between, but I think this time I'll try to alternate them a little more and we'll see what we get. So this is a little different way of assembling. But I will do that and then I will be right back. And you can see I mostly alternated large and small, but not completely. Down here I used some more of the, well, I mostly did. I mostly alternated large and small. And then we're gonna take some glue dots on the back of this as well. Or actually, you know what, before we do that, we are going to put these on. And for this, I used my multi-purpose liquid glue. And if I had thought ahead, I actually would have used my adhesive sheets, because that would have made it a little easier, but I forgot. Adhesive sheets are fabulous. And so these I'm going to center around here as well, trying to hide the little stem if possible, and tuck them in between. I like that look of overlapping. So I'm going to do this kind of around the wreath. Whoops. Make sure you get your glue to adhere. And I'm going to finish that and be right back. All right, and I did use 5, partly because odd numbers are pleasing, and partly because I knew there would be space down here for the bow. And so that I'm going to use some glue dots for. Probably 1 in the center and 1 on each side. And then that will go here. And there's our wreath. And so we're going to, like I said, put this on with dimensional. So we'll put this on the card front first, because we're going to add a little bit more ribbon. There we go. So this will help to anchor this ribbon. And we center that. And then I'm going to grab my pool party ribbon again and just tie a little knot on one side. It's so sheer, I felt like it got lost. And so adding the knot kind of makes it a little more prominent. So that was my thinking there. So again, just working off the roll, tie a little knot, move it close to the tag. Give it a little snip at an angle. And we'll snip this one at an angle. And there's our bow. So now I'm going to use some dimensionals to pop it up, with the idea that I want to make sure there's enough dimensionals on the back so that there aren't any saggy parts. And I'm down to the end, so I'm just going to snip some pieces and place those around. Whoops. So we can do some longer sections. And I'll take the paper off. And we adhere that toward the bottom, kind of centered around these 3 sides. And then I decided to add some bling, because what's a card without bling? So I have the Festive pearls, the red ones. I believe they're real red, but I think they coordinate nicely. So I'm just going to grab my take your pick tool and we'll add a little bling. Again, 5 around the wreath. Let's see, I tried to cover up some of the stems where I couldn't tuck them in. So we'll start this way. Maybe 1 here and 1 maybe over here. And the last one here. So again, odd numbers, and that is it. That is our card, my card for today. I hope you like it. And so remember my little tip about making sure your stamp is straight, except do a little better job than I did. And I will also have a tip, a little video about a tip about how to line up your die with that wreath stamp, because I didn't talk about it on camera since I did it off camera, but I'm going to give you a tip, because there is a way to make sure that you line it up and it's easy. So you will see that tip also, or you may have already seen it depending on when I decide to, I may do the tips first before the video. So maybe you've already seen it, so you know how to line it up. And so hopefully those are helpful. Thank you again for joining us on our Woohoo Weekend. If you find something that you just love and have to have, reach out to the demonstrator who invited you, and she can hook you up with placing an order. So I do want to show you, though, before I sign off, what I used to make the card, the Cottage Wreaths bundle. So it's great for actually Thanksgiving and Halloween and Christmas. And then the dies that go with it. This is the stamp set and the country wreath dies. These are really fun because they are dimensional. Or this one is dimensional, actually. This one is not. These are the two that cut out these two wreaths. So again, there's a little mark, and I'll show you in my, or you saw in my tip video, how to line those up. There are multiples. There are 3 of those leaves that we used in the Pear Pizzazz. You can stamp that bow and cut it out, or you can use the die to cut out the bow that we used today. You can cut out lots of most of the other images, I think all of them, except for obviously the sentiments. And with some, there are multiples, which is really fun. So a great bundle to have. And then I used the seasonal labels dies. So I used this large one, obviously, but there are lots of smaller ones. So like I said, to cover up your mistake, maybe that one would even work, and you could put it on the inside. So usually there's a way to cover your mistake. So I may go back and actually do that with mine. And then for the inside sentiment, I use sweet candy canes. There's another good one, may the good times of today become the cherished memories of tomorrow. It was really hard to decide between the two of them. So lots of good sentiments in there too. And then of course, last but not least, that beautiful painted Christmas Designer Series paper. This is a returning favorite from last year's catalog, and I believe it's on the last chance list. Take a look at that. Just beautiful. It was really hard to decide which one to use. I thought about using that. Just so many pretty options, and then the coordinating colors and patterns on the other side. So get that while you can. And thank you again for joining me. We so appreciate you watching on our Woohoo Black Friday weekend. And if you see anything that you really have to have, reach out to the demonstrator who invited you, and she will hook you up with that. All right, take care, everyone. Happy stamping.